All right. Welcome to the Fight Block. Possibly our last episode in this format. I had the intentions of making this go to podcast, be an hour-long show, but the podcast is temporarily on hiatus, working on figuring that out still, and the 1 hour audio on YouTube just isn't the right format for YouTube, and it's just not an attractive product, so to say. So possibly the last Fight Block episode in this format. So look for some upcoming changes. Always open for new ideas and whatnot. So stay tuned on that. But yeah. So this is our episode, I believe 8. It's our UFC 153 recap. Some good fights. For a card that was almost, or it wasn't almost, but had the potential of being canceled. Had Anderson Silva not stepped in and saved the card. It turned out to be a good night of fights. So my name is Jeremy, host of this soon to change up show. Here with
Coop,
as always, and took me a while to get the introduction there on this time. Usually I'm starting the show out with that, but yeah. So let's move on to just right away. It's going to be a shorter episode. We're just going to give our main card recap. I saw all but 2 fights, so Matt will help me out with those. And but yeah, all around, just a solid night of fights.
Yeah, definitely. For a card that was in trouble, it ended up delivering. Definitely was a card of the year candidates as far as how it delivered. On paper, it just looked like another interesting card. A few matchups looked worth watching, but it definitely delivered all around. And I can't say that there was a fight on the main card and even a good amount of ones in the undercard, preliminary cards that I was disappointed with. So definitely tune in. There's a lot to watch if you didn't watch it. So a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, and I mean definitely, being Brazil and just having the fighters representing their home country, there's a lot of spirit and heart from a lot of the fighters too. So it definitely showed. But starting out with the first fight on the main card, it was Damian Maia defeating Rick Story by submission. An impressive showing by Damian Maia. This technically you can call his official debut at welterweight, since his first matchup with Dong Hyun Kim was cut short due to Dong Hyun Kim's injury. But Damian Maia is showing, he's definitely a contender and someone to look out for in the welterweight division. Going back to his old ways and submitting Rick Story, really gave Rick Story no chance in this fight. Took him down and was all over him right from the start. And then locked in just a brutal rear naked choke. One of the worst rear naked chokes I've seen. And I say that because, he had his neck cranked, and then next thing you know, blood comes flowing out of Rick Story's nose. Joe Rogan freaks out and forces Story to tap. But, all around, just a great showing from Maia.
Yeah, it was pretty dominant. Not much to talk about here other than just, the move itself and Maia's dominance. Rick Story's one of those guys that's inconsistent, and he's a horrible stylistic matchup for some people who make certain mistakes. But, I doubt he's ever going to be a contender in the division, a serious contender. But he's somebody that can definitely halt the progress of guys who are unfavorable matchups against him. So definitely a great win for Maia, and I'm really excited to see him fight next.
Any ideas who you think would be next in line for Maia at welterweight?
Yeah, I actually think that the best possible matchup is Maia versus Fitch. You get the best out of Fitch when you book him against another grappler. When you get a striker who Fitch just kind of manhandles, but he has trouble finishing, he tries at least. But if you match Fitch against a striker, he's just gonna take him down, ground and pound, take him down, ground and pound, pretty much have his way with him. But if you get him against a really good grappler, and Maia is no doubt head and shoulders above Silva in the grappling department, that would be a crazy back-and-forth fight.
Definitely, and we'll talk more about Fitch, but his submission defense was definitely on display in his fight against Eric Silva, so that would definitely be an interesting matchup should the fight go to the ground. Some other interesting matchups for Maia at welterweight, Ellenberger's always there in the mix, and also, down the road, I could see an interesting matchup between Maia and Nick Diaz. I'd like to kind of see that fight. Diaz should work him on the feet, definitely has the advantage there, but, just should end up on the ground. Be interesting to see, the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu against Damian Maia's black belt background. But, yeah, so all around solid performance from Maia, and definitely good things to come from him in the welterweight division, I'm sure. And some good matchups and fights, definitely. Moving on to the next fight, it was one that neither you or I saw, but just going off of the fight recap, sound pretty much as we predicted. I think you actually called this fight for Phil Davis. He defeats Wagner Prado by submission and conduct choke. It seemed like Phil Davis definitely was able to take Prado down without a whole lot of struggle, and then eventually landed a choke on him. I think Prado was trying to get up to his feet from what I remember reading, and then he just kind of slapped it in. But all around, an expected win from Davis, but definitely shows that he's still in the mix after coming off that loss to Rashad Evans.
Yeah, it's a kind of confidence-building win that he needed. A little bit delayed by the way his last fight with Prado went with the eye poke. Kind of funny at the weigh-ins when they were facing off. Prado stuck his fingers together on his left hand out, in front of his nose, that way as to block an eye poke. And Phil Davis raised his fingers up like he was going to poke him. So that was kind of a funny moment. But no animosity between these guys. But yeah, predicted win. Phil Davis by submission didn't surprise me at all. Took him a little bit to do it, but Phil Davis is a pretty patient guy. He's not one of those bull rush, manhandle you kind of guys. Although he did, have his way with him on the ground for the most part at times. Predicting next fight for Phil Davis, I'm going to say the winner of Thiago Silva and Stanislav Nedkov.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with you there. I don't know if he's ready again for a high level competitor or contender like Rashad Evans or top echelon of the division quite yet. He still needs to build up his skills, so that would be a good matchup. So,
and then the winner of that fight should face the winner of whomever Ryan Bader faces next. I just think Phil Davis and Ryan Bader would be a pretty interesting matchup too, but UFC doesn't really like to match up guys who are coming off losses and wins when they can avoid it. So I could see that being the path for both of these guys.
Definitely. Moving on to the fight, I was surprised that I was looking most forward to this fight, but it delivered. Definitely the fight of the night: John Fitch against Eric Silva. Big win for John Fitch. He wins by decision, but this was really a back and forth battle until the third round, where Fitch really took control. But all around, just a great fight. We had some solid striking, some good shots landed, but what really was on display here was the grappling, and back and forth submissions, and all around just a really, really good fight.
Yeah, John Fitch gets a lot of unnecessary hate, as we talked about, and basically if you skip this John Fitch fight, then you missed out, because this is definitely one of his best fights, just like the BJ Penn fight. Seems like Fitch is most entertaining and exciting when he's facing somebody who's really competent at grappling. Like I said earlier, this is definitely it. Silva's, more than handled himself on the ground. Fitch also took some shots standing, so I think what I'd said last time, it pretty much, I think, proves it, that Fitch's chin is not gone at all or deteriorated. He took that fight when he was injured. He took that fight when he needed money, and he just got caught. Plenty of guys get knocked out at one point, and it doesn't mean they're going to get TKO'd or KO'd in any of their fights for a while after necessarily. And Fitch has never been a guy to make excuses. He doesn't lose much, but when he has, like against GSP, he's always said, just back to the drawing board. He's better than me. I got to get better than him now. So I believed him when he said, when he gave an excuse. I believed it was a valid one, and it looked like it, because, I would say if this fight represented anything, it's that Eric Silva may be the future, but you better believe John Fitch is the present.
Yeah, Fitch... some were calling this a do-or-die fight for Fitch, coming off that knockout loss. And, had he lost two in a row, especially to a up-and-coming prospect, someone trying to make a name of himself, out of the John Fitch name, by beating Fitch, Fitch definitely put a halt to that and said, I'm still one of the best in the division. For a long time, he was considered, he definitely was considered in the top pound-for-pound list on several lists for a while. And he was just kind of one of those guys that had the same kind of style as GSP, where you control your opponent and you just wear them out, but
it's less striking.
Yeah, but GSP was just that much better than he was, just enough to divide the 1 and the 2. And so for a while it was Fitch 2, GSP number 1, and Fitch, had he not suffered that knockout loss to Hendricks, he would definitely potentially be in the title hunt right now. And
yeah, we could be seeing him face off against guys like Martin Kampmann, or somebody like Jake Ellenberger, or somebody else like, well, Jake Ellenberger was on a win streak, of course. Or we could be seeing him face off against guys like Nick Diaz or Carlos Condit. All those fights, especially after this fight, look a lot more appealing to me because all those guys are more competent with their grappling. So, yeah, I think it just kind of proves that Fitch is not, just a score points kind of guy. He's a very intelligent fighter, so he isn't just going to go out there and fight with a dumb game plan and stand and bang, or basically put submission over position necessarily. He's a guy who's going to put position first, but he is always trying to work for a finish. He's just not that good at finishing.
Yeah, I mean, it was an exciting second round. First round went to Fitch, and third round went to Fitch on most of the judges' scorecards. One judge had it 30-27 for Fitch. Gave him. Am I reading that right? Was there a judge that gave the second round to Fitch? Well, I guess the second round.
The second round was back and forth because they both had moments. It's just that I would say Eric Silva's had a few more of them.
Silva, almost had Fitch in the second round with that rear naked choke. It had it pretty deep on Fitch. Fitch was able to defend against it, roll out of it, and then actually to close out the round had Eric Silva in quite a deep armbar too that Silva was able to roll out a little bit too, but
he also took his back as well.
Yeah. So yeah, true. The second round was back and forth. I definitely gave the second round to Silva also, as two judges did also. But Fitch just came out third round, just dominated, and Silva gassed a little bit, or quite a bit, I should say. And yeah, Fitch just put on a solid performance.
Yeah, but I would also say that even the rounds that Fitch won, Silva still had moments in too. So I think that's part of what made the fight so exciting. It was almost like don't blink or don't go up and go to the bathroom or whatever, get a snack, because when one of these guys looks like he's about to win, all of a sudden the other guy turns it around.
Yeah, definitely. And just kind of a closing thoughts. I remember when I finished watching the fights. There's always that debate on when you got new mixed martial arts fans kind of coming in and you're trying to introduce them to the sport. You kind of say what fight should I show them? And I think definitely the John Fitch, Eric Silva fight could definitely be considered one of those fights that you could show new mixed martial arts fans, because you had some quality striking, you had some good shots landed. I know Fitch landed a really nice uppercut that rocked Silva, and Silva too, I think, dropped Fitch in the first round
and took his back briefly.
Yeah. So, and then the ground game, a lot of people, new MMA fans, it's the ground game they don't understand, that they considered boring and whatnot. And, this is one of those ground fights that you're just like exactly like you said, you can't get up and walk away because, something might happen. And so, exciting ground game. So I would consider this fight, one of those fights that, you could definitely show new mixed martial arts fans and see the whole entire game, so to say.
Yeah, totally different type of fight of the night. And, if you're a true fan, I would say that you can, for instance, like a fight better, like Ronnie Jason versus Sam Cecilia from the undercard, which is, rock 'em, sock 'em, back and forth. And it's totally fine to have a preference, but when you're, being a true fan and an objective observer of the whole thing, you need to at least be able to appreciate them both the same amount. It's okay to have a personal favorite. That's everybody's going to have a favorite team, a little bit of bias. But when you're objectively reporting on it, you can't say that Ronnie Jason and Sam, their fight was more entertaining than a Fitch versus Silva fight, even if it had gone all 3 rounds instead of just ending in the second.
Yeah, definitely. And just a quick shout out to that undercard fight. Ronnie, he was the, I believe, Ultimate Fighter winner in Brazil.
Winner.
And so that was a big win for him to get. I think that was his first fight post-show after winning it. So I know the fans were really behind him and were pretty fired up to see Ronnie, or Hani, or however you pronounce it in Brazil. Hani. We're pretty pumped that he won that fight. So that was a big one for Brazil. But moving on, I missed this fight also, but Glover Teixeira defeated Fabio Maldonado by TKO in the second round, although the round ended, but the doctor stopped it right towards the end because Maldonado had taken so much damage. A lot of people, from what I read, were surprised he was even still standing. So
Yeah, that was a crazy fight. I mean, it's one of those fights where you say, yeah, it's super, super one-sided, but at the same time, the other guy still had some moments. I remember just thinking as soon as Teixeira tagged him hard with a left hook in the first round and then, took him down, got on top of him and mounted him, and was dropping some heavy ground and pound in full mount. I'm like, oh, man, this is it. And that's, about a minute into the fight, give or take. And then all of a sudden, it's a little more, Fabio escapes a submission, and then all of a sudden, they're back on their feet, and Maldonado just drills him with a left hook and almost knocks out Teixeira. And so it's pretty crazy to see a fight that, although you could still score it a 10-8 round, Maldonado is still on his feet dishing out punishment. Then he was undefeated, I think, like 22-0 as a amateur boxer. And, most of the boxers are going to have good chins, just given their background. So Maldonado is showing that he has a chin of granite, and it's one of those fights where even though he lost, and fairly decisively, you definitely think he earned some points with the brass, and definitely I think they'll want to see him again, maybe against a guy who lost himself like Brandon Vera or something like that. But I definitely know that I think the fight with Teixeira and Rampage should be rebooked for sure. It was made anyways. This fight definitely served its purpose in its place. I would say Teixeira proved in this fight he's more than ready for Rampage, and that would be a great fight. So I think they should just go with what they decided the first time and book that.
Agreed. That's the fight I think should be next for Teixeira, and then also, this is the third straight loss for Maldonado, but I do know Dana White post-show said that they're not cutting him, that he's sticking around. So Fabio Maldonado definitely will be around for another fight in the UFC. Moving on to the co-main event, Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira defeated Dave Herman by submission armbar. Kind of an interesting fight. Nogueira, definitely the spirited Brazilian, really wanting to win this one in his home country. Came out, 10 months after breaking his arm and just looked really good in this fight. Dave Herman, though, kind of a interesting approach and game plan.
Yeah, I'd say Herman looked good early, snapping those kicks and head kicks, and I'm like, oh, he's going to keep him at range and use his ranginess. But then he really didn't throw enough punches or just throw enough in general. He evaded a lot of what Nogueira did, and Nogueira didn't look excellent or anything. But it was just one of those things where I kept waiting. I'm like, okay, well, obviously Herman's being patient and waiting to throw the kill switch on something, but that something never happened. I mean, I know he trains with Dan Henderson, and Henderson's philosophy is, pick your spots, set up the kill shot, and take it when it's available. And, if it doesn't come, he's more than willing to grind out a decision. But I think that's the difference. Henderson's always kind of looking to grind it out and be scoring points while he waits for that shot to open up, whereas it looked like Herman was content to just let Nogueira rack up points little by little on the scorecards.
Yeah, well, Herman came out in the second round and was, content to just stand there still in front of Nogueira, use his arm reach to try and keep a distance, but it costed him because, Nogueira came in with a nice combo, caught him with I believe a left hook, and just dropped Herman to the ground, really rocked him there, and then, was able for the most part I know Herman got back up to his feet after, but a couple close submission attempts from Nogueira in the second round. Herman was able to escape an armbar that was very close. So that was good submission defense, but, Nogueira got it right back on the ground and had a really nice transition into an armbar and just wouldn't let Herman escape the second attempt. So Nogueira definitely, firing up the crowd, and a big win for Nogueira coming off that broken arm from Frank Mir. Definitely, had Mir finish in that fight, but chose to go to the submission and costed him. So it was a good bounce-back fight. He is, not as old as he looks, so he's still got a few years left in him, hopefully. He's been in a lot of wars, but he's definitely, he can string together some wins. He's definitely a good, competitor in the heavyweight division that, a lot of people have kind of forgotten about a little bit. But I think he's definitely a good matchup for, let's see, who would you put him against, do you think?
Well, I don't think he's ever going to get a title shot as long as Junior Dos Santos is champion, considering their history and the fact that, he coaches him.
I was thinking, a good matchup right now would be Bigfoot Silva, but they probably wouldn't fight each other either, being from Brazil.
I would say, he's one of those guys where he definitely isn't shot. He's definitely battle worn, like you said. But just because he's not going to get he could get a title shot in the heavyweight division because you only need about 3 wins strung together there, against notables. So it would be possible if Kane beats Dos Santos that he could get a title shot again. But even then, their fight was so one-sided the first time. I just kind of have this feeling that Nogueira's, even if he had the necessary wins, would probably be thrown up against a bad matchup like Carwin or something rather than given a title opportunity. I think that there are options with him, and I think that the best one is to put him against, Strikeforce they claim that they're going to do a show in January, but hopefully that means that Daniel Cormier and some of those guys will come over first and whatnot. But assuming Josh Barnett comes over, I say why not make the trilogy fight between Nogueira and Barnett. They have a history. It's a friendly rivalry. They don't really have any animosity. Barnett beat him in the first one, pretty good. And then in the second one, Nogueira won via decision. And, both fights were amazing fights. And I think it's about time they had a third one. I think it would be a great test of mettle for Barnett because it's one of the top guys. And one that'll kind of bring out the most excitement in both guys, too. A lot of good grappling exchanges. They're both comparable in their striking levels. I would say Barnett probably hits a bit harder, and Nogueira might be a little bit more technical. And then on the ground, you have kind of the catch wrestling, submission wrestling versus Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Strikeforce. Why not, Daniel Cormier is looking for a fight. I think a Nogueira-Cormier matchup would be good. It's another one of those, up-and-coming guys against a legend, and definitely has the marketing value to that fight too. So, I definitely don't – I know they've got contracts with Strikeforce, and they got to finish off a fight and this and that, but, to put Cormier on the shelf all the way till January, I just don't think is fair.
Yeah, if they're going to send somebody over, if you want to get somebody who's ranked higher than Daniel Cormier's last fight, you'll go with Fabricio Verdum. Who currently is not doing anything to my knowledge. But, Nogueira, of course, has definite name value, especially when you were considering bringing in guys like Tim Sylvia anyways. If you want to go higher than Cormier's last opponent, which was Barnett, ironically enough, then I would say that you go with somebody like Fabricio Verdum. Or if they're really going to put Cormier on hold till January, they could rebook the Frank Mir fight. But, yeah, there are possibilities for Nogueira. He could face the winner of Roy Nelson and Shane Carwin, too. I have kind of a hard time believing that UFC would really want to put him in there against Carwin, though. That just kind of seems like it could go pretty awfully for Nogueira because Carwin is one of those guys who is a bad matchup, being somebody who's just gigantic and, just hits really hard. So I think that they should do the smart thing and just book him against Barnett.
Yeah. I would agree. I'd like to see the trilogy completed, but
I'd also like to see. I will say, I don't. Even though he fought like an idiot, I don't think Dave Herman should be fired because he did show that he has shown a lot of potential in his fights. And the heavyweight division is one of those divisions that it's like on the fringe of being kind of thin too. So I think they should hang on to as many quality names as they have. Maybe give him a fight against. Somebody like Shane Del Rosario, somebody who's also coming off a loss, or Stipe Miocic, and really somebody will bring out the best in a crowd-pleasing fight, but also kind of test the mettle, see which guy is, ready, which guy maybe should leave the UFC for a little bit and come back.
Well, yeah, the heavyweight division's always been one of those marquee divisions, so it's like if you've got someone with some decent talent, you don't necessarily want to cut them because I know UFC's got so many different weight classes now, especially with their lighter weight classes that they've added, that they're usually filling up the cards, with those undercard, lightweight, lighter weight class matchups, but people still want to see the heavyweights. And when you got guys like Herman who, for the most part bring it and put on good fights when he's in the octagon, why not, you don't really see a whole lot of heavyweight division matchups on the undercards or the prelims. No. So it's like, why not, continue to hold that talent? There's not really anywhere else for these guys to go.
He also has kind of if you look at Dave Herman's track record coming into the UFC, he had one fight that was probably at his level with John Olavinamo, who's a talented guy. He just kind of had a long layoff. Actually, John Olavinamo was in insane jiu-jitsu. Training with Alistair Overeem and, Golden Glory back when Alistair was there. So he's a talented guy, but, that kind of more represented Dave Herman's skill level. And then they gave him a jump to Struve, who didn't necessarily look like a jump, but we kind of found out since then that Struve may be a future possible title contender. he definitely needs a name win before, but that's definitely a tough fight. Then he faces Roy Nelson, who is on the cusp of a title shot himself, and then he goes to face Nogueira, the only man to hold the UFC and Pride belts ever. So he's definitely had some tough tests. It wasn't like he lost to, John Smith, some nobody.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, I mean, he's in a good camp with Dan Henderson. He's got good coaches, and seems like he's got the background behind him to be successful. So I definitely think
he's got the physical talents. He's definitely really athletic and a lot of big reach and good height.
So yeah, I would have to agree with you that I see him it being tough for them, to cut these heavyweights because when he has displayed some talent, and it's just kind of like there's nowhere else for these guys to go, and there's really no reason why you shouldn't. I mean, you still want your weight classes not to be filled with your marquee guys. You still need you're technically putting on a show when you're selling fight cards. And I know they've got so many different weight classes now, but it's like you should still keep these guys around, still find them fights. You got fuel cards, you got FX cards, and there's no reason why you shouldn't keep talent around like that. So I think maybe the days of losing 2 fights in a row and getting cut hopefully are behind a little bit with so many show opportunities. UFC is going to be wanting to keep their talent around, but yeah, I would have to agree that hopefully that Herman sticks around and gets another fight. But moving on to the main event, Anderson Silva defeating Stephan Bonnar by TKO in the first round, once again showing why he is the best pound for pound fighter in the world. Just an amazing mixed martial artist and the best out there. And doing it in interesting fashion, in Anderson Silva fashion, trying to prove himself. He may not have respected Bonnar and his talents and what he brought, and he definitely, whether I don't know, it seemed like he was either overconfident inside the cage or really is just that confident in himself to the point to where what I'm getting at is he put his back completely up against the cage. It pretty much just told Bonnar, bring it. And, that's a lot of analysts before the fight said the way Bonnar wins this fight, to get in, close the distance, push Silva against the cage, make it a dirty fight, up against the cage, dirty boxing, and clinching and using his, strength and power to hold Silva, against the cage and, limit, the distance and Silva's ability to land those shots. Well, Silva puts his back against the cage. Bonnar goes to reset in the middle. Silva wants nothing to do with it. He said, come on, bring it. And he stands up and he does, he had a couple Forrest Griffin moments there too where he's bobbing the head and dodging punches. And, I said that Bonnar would bring a fight and it wouldn't be as humiliating as Forrest Griffin's performance. But, Silva made Bonnar look pretty silly. And,
yeah, I'd say that he definitely outclassed him. I mean, it wasn't in like a comical way necessarily like the Forrest one was where he knocked him out with a jab, but he definitely showed hands down that, the skill differential is just huge.
Yeah, the one thing that makes me, not nervous, but, for Silva, just, especially with his whole legacy and what he's done, he tends to drop his hands and, do the whole head bob weave thing. Bonnar landed some decent shots. There was one moment where, he landed like one shot on the temple and then followed up with another shot on the chin. Silva kind of shook it off, but, you get someone in there who's got some power behind his fist. You got like a Vitor Belfort. Granted, he probably wouldn't do something like that against a Vitor Belfort. No. But still, you drop your hands like that. Everyone gets caught. I would hate to see Silva, get knocked out in a way like that. But, he drops his hands and he bobs the wrong way and goes right into a punch, against the wrong guy, you're going out,
Yeah. It may even end up being a guy that you're rooting for, too. I wouldn't. At the end of the day, Belfort's a worthy title contender, but if he was facing some upstart, guy with a Tito Ortiz mouth who nobody respected and nobody thought deserved to be there in the first place, then again, people may have a different story. But, if you're going to do that, you're going to pay too. You saw Mayhem pay for it against Bisping. He didn't get brutally knocked out at all, but he did get tagged for sure a couple times. But, Anderson, believes in his chin for sure, just like a guy like Chris Lieben does. He just kind of, does head movement and whatnot most of the time. But, yeah, Bonnar's definitely not one of those guys who's known for one-punch knockout power at all.
Yeah, and really the only reason Silva took this fight was, probably the extra paycheck to save the card, but also to put on a show. And it was a first round finish, but he definitely, gave the crowd what they wanted and displayed his talents and really showed everyone why he's the best once again. And the way he did finish Bonner too was, he was messing with Bonner. He put his back up against the cage. He was doing the head bob and weave, but when he saw, Bonner, I think, went for a takedown, Silva reversed and kind of shrugged Bonner off, where Bonner kind of lost balance and was backpedaling and trying to regain his balance. And that's when Silva said, all right, this is my moment. This is time to finish the fight. And you really could see him, snap into his killer instinct and just delivered a brutal, brutal knee to the sternum of Bonner and dropped Bonner immediately. And, I think he landed a decent shot before that too. But yeah, Bonner just was not going to recover from that and just accepted the loss pretty much and covered up. But it was impressive because, Bonner's never been finished, and he's never, we've known how much punishment he can take. That was what was, marketed before the fights, is how much brutal punishment this guy's taken over his career. But then you get one shot from Anderson Silva, and that's that.
Yeah, and it's not even that Anderson Silva hits harder so much as that he hits super accurate too. Like you said, he just saw his opportunity and took it. You get the idea that he had some mental picture about the perfect area to kind of drill Bonner with, and that's what he did, and that's why he's the Spider. As far as predicting next fights, I'd say for Bonner, he's definitely not going to retire with having beaten the best pound-for-pound fighter, but it would kind of be fitting in a way to have him and Forrest face each other, especially if should Forrest win or lose almost to Chael Sonnen. Forrest is at the point where he's not going to get a title shot again. He could technically if he beats Sonnen. He's at a point where he could, I guess, with the right wins, get in there, but it's not likely that he would ever be the actual champion again. So
I wonder how bad Forrest would want that fight, though. That's like a fight for Bonner. That's like a final send-off fight for Bonner. Because Forrest doesn't want to lose that last fight, especially after having 2 wins on him. And it's just kind of like a lose-lose for Forrest. If he beats him for the 3rd time, all right. But it's definitely a match. Both fights, both guys have put on battles, and it would be a fitting finale fight if they both were like, you know what, we've come to the end of the road. Let's just do this fight one last time.
Yeah,
and win or lose, that would be the end.
Yeah, that's why I think if Forrest loses to Sonnen, who is a middleweight, he'd be kind of at that point, because Forrest has specifically said before, he's terrified of John Jones, and he doesn't want to face guys like that anymore. He doesn't want to face Anderson Silva.
He always talks about how he's already figuring out things he wants to do and pursue post-fighting career. So he's definitely got his mind on other things, too.
Yeah, that's why I could see Forrest being up for it, especially if he loses, because it's one of those things where people are always going to probably remember the fight that Forrest won, the first fight that Forrest won anyways. They're not, the second fight doesn't even really get talked about. And, their third fight, if they made it live up to the first fight, maybe people will talk about that one too, or the fact that it's a send-off fight. It just seems more fitting. Forrest did just beat Tito, though, so I could see them waiting for Forrest to get, at least one more loss in there for sure. As far as Anderson goes, who knows? It's kind of like a head-scratching / headache to kind of pick. Silva says GSP. GSP has a fight coming up. You have to see how that goes. Plus, GSP all of a sudden has a bunch of new contenders, so I'm not really interested in seeing the welterweight division on hold for an entire year unless they decide to, what if GSP wins the belt and then goes to fight Silva? Then are they going to just recreate the interim title to let shit figure itself out while GSP spends a necessary time bulking up for 6 months to fight Silva at a catch weight of 180? That just doesn't make sense to me. Really, I think Anderson honestly should be fighting some more of the guys at 185, because 185 is now the most exciting that it's ever been. I could understand him wanting to wait till one of the guys there gets another win, like Chris Weidman beats somebody on a pay-per-view card that more people are going to see to build himself up, or something like that, for sure. Or Bisping in the UK, possibly. Not saying that's a fight that people want to see, because they think Bisping's going to win, but it's definitely a marketable fight, and it'll make Silva some money, which is good. I'm not really interested in seeing him face John Jones yet myself, because as much as I think actually Silva would beat John Jones, Jones just had a lot of trouble with a middleweight anyways, so I think Jones still has some contenders to clean out in his division. I don't want to see Silva versus Jones more than I want to see, Dan Henderson versus Jones. And I just think booking Anderson against the division up or division down, it's for the fans, but it really fucks over the rest of the guys in the division too. So, I'm not interested in seeing all these interim titles created and whatnot. I think, Anderson now more than ever has some cleaning out to do at 185. John Jones especially has to do a lot at 205, and GSP probably is the hardest task because 170 is the biggest shark tank out of those three divisions right now. I would say with 185 being close behind it.
Yeah, and definitely with GSP coming off his knee injury, we don't know how complete he's going to 100% he'll be. So we'll see that definitely in his Condit fight. I think that would definitely answer a lot of the super fight callings, whether or not GSP beats Condit or not. But yeah, it seems like at post fight, everyone's calling for a super fight, including Dana. Dana, Silva's voice that he's doesn't want to fight John Jones. John Jones doesn't want to fight Anderson Silva. And, when asked after the fight, Joe Rogan asked Anderson Silva, is there any more fights here at 205 that you would want to take? And, Silva answered like, no, I just came up to save the card. And, I'm going back to middleweight. I'm 185. That's where I fight. And, yeah, there are some contenders. Weidman's definitely calling for Silva. He's one of those.
You got Boach.
Bisping. And, Belfort's dropping back down. Get Belfort a win.
Munoz is on a tear, so he's probably only a couple wins away for sure. You've got guys like Husamar Palhares and, Yushin Okami, who,
I think just what fans really want is to see Silva truly challenged. We've seen how great of a martial artist he is and just how foolish he makes his opponents and just how dominant he is. People are calling for these super fights because the whole idea is, we want to see Silva challenged.
Or GSP challenged.
Or GSP, depending on how he comes back. But I feel like more people want to see, Silva. That's what really drew the attention was when Chael Sonnen, pushed Silva to the break. And that's what really garnered just the whole, fan attention was to see Silva in that moment of possible defeat. That's the money-making moment right there is, to put Silva in a position that no one's seen him in before. And
yeah, you saw the same thing with Fedor, too, although, Fedor didn't really – not that Silva has – they're both kind of the same, their personality. They're these humble foreigners who are pretty nice to everybody, and then they don't really – Silva kind of will say some stuff back if you piss him off. Fedor just kind of sits there and smiles. But, that's why people would tune in to see Fedor in some senses, too. That's why people tune in to see GSP fight, and that's why people tune in to see John Jones fight. I think with John Jones' attitude, people kind of tune in because they want to see him, a little bit punished too, a lot more than they want to see Anderson or GSP punished necessarily. But whenever you become one of the pound-for-pound guys, Junior Dos Santos may get there soon if he defends the belt like 2 or 3 more times. But fans just kind of want to see if they're going to see one of these pedestal built-up champions fall.
Yeah.
I will say it was nice to end the card on a great note, feel-good note of seeing Anderson and Big Nog in there together. That was kind of really nice to see, even though it happened previously, the last time they were both in Rio together.
Yeah, Big Nog giving Silva a big hug while screaming. They're both screaming, ah! And Nog is picking them up and down. Yeah, that was a good moment, definitely.
Yeah, little Nog got in there, too, and helped them both.
Yeah. And Silva giving Team Nogueira a little shout-out after his fight. But, yeah, I would completely agree with you, too, that as much as they were calling for the Silva-Jones matchup after the fight, that's just a matchup that I'm not ready to see yet. I feel like, it would be a super fight. But, like you said, I still feel like Jones has a lot of guys that he needs to fight and beat in the division to claim to be the best, And he got a pretty good scare in his last fight against Belfort and shows, he's definitely able to be he's definitely catchable in submissions. And, Jones after the fight admitted, he's got to work on his submission game. And so, yeah, I would agree with you that, as much as people were calling for it, that wasn't what I was thinking was next for Silva. And it would be an interesting matchup, with Jones' wrestling, he could definitely give Silva a run, and vice versa. Silva's got the striking to beat Jones, and so it'd be a sick fight to see, but I just not yet, or not now. But what's tough is, everyone wants to see Silva challenge before he ends his career. And Silva's, one moment he's saying he's retiring after a year, next moment he says, he's got 5 more years in him, and he's kind of all over the place. So we really don't know how long Silva's got left in the cage. He seems fresh. He doesn't seem like he's an old 37, or I think he's around 37, 38, getting up there. But he looks like he definitely has a good amount of fights left in him. Just whether he sticks around. He's got a family and everything, and I think that's why everyone's wanting this super fight, is they want one to happen before the time comes up and it's past, or there's no super fight to make. Should GSP lose, and who knows what happens with John Jones. Super fights don't come around very often, and when they can be made, fans are going to want to see them. But
yeah, I agree. I think you hit the nail on the head. There's arguments to be made for the super fight, but at the end of the day, people. The reason they're making a super fight is because one of the guys has to lose. One of them, one of these records is going down with at least one loss, whether it's GSP, Jones, Silva. Somebody's going to walk out with some red on their record. And I think that's what people want. But at the same time, there are other people who just want the built-up superstardom aspect of this epic clash, like Mayweather, Pacquiao. And you saw Pacquiao will lose, quote-unquote, in his last fight, and to some guy who was kind of not as heralded. But that doesn't mean that a guy in Silva or GSP's weight class could really – it doesn't mean that they couldn't be built up to the same stardom, too. You have a guy like John Fitch. Like, let's pretend John Fitch was some knockout artist or some guy who was a finisher. That would be a pretty epic possible trilogy with GSP, because that if he was more exciting, they would have already booked a second fight.
Yeah. Well, here's how I feel. Like, right now, this would be an amazing, incredible win for Silva should he pull off a super fight win over Jones. That would just cement his legacy and prove he is the best of all time and is up in the ranks of your Muhammad Ali's in terms of this sport. He would be looked back upon as historically just a Michael Jordan, which, he's already can be considered that. But this would just completely cement it, a win over John Jones. But I feel, in turn, should John Jones beat Silva, Jones has tons of fights left in his career. They have this super fight, and, John Jones wins and puts that, bad mark on Silva's career. And Jones goes on, he does big things, and, Silva fight is way down his line of, this is years down the road, and, no one's going to remember that fight he had with Silva, or maybe they will, but, it just would be like, oh, remember that time that he fought Silva? And Jones isn't at the point of his career where he's looking for super fights. He still needs to prove himself.
Yeah. Oh, exactly, yeah, because that's the thing. He's been king of a division that right now is at its weakest point that it's been in the last decade, pretty much. Light heavyweight, it's starting to be a little bit more interesting, but at the same time, there are only a couple names that you would think of right now. Of course, people are going to develop eventually, but Jones hasn't really tested his mettle in my eyes. He's still fairly untested as a champion. He looks really good in all his wins, but you look at Anderson's being talked about for super fights because the dude's getting into the teens as far as wins go in the octagon, and he hasn't lost once. GSP too. These are the guys that have really cleaned out their divisions. There are new contenders surging, but at least at some point they had people wondering, oh, who's he going to fight next? At some point in their kind of reign of terrors, if you want to call it that. So I think that's why GSP and Silva have kind of more earned the fight against each other, even if people would rather see Jones lose than either Silva or GSP walk away with a loss, when they'd rather see GSP and Silva make a paycheck than Jones too. But
yeah, well, looking at it how I just presented it, I think it would make more sense, to make a GSP Anderson Silva matchup in the sense that these guys have both done their time. They're both nearing. GSP's still got a few good fights in him, but he's definitely could call it quits any time. Who knows how long he's going to be left in there? But they're both nearing the ends of their careers, and a win over either one of them would really just cement their legacy. GSP, completing his career by beating Anderson Silva would rank him as he doesn't have the highlight reel finishes as of late, but you could definitely consider him a Muhammad Ali of the sport. Should he beat Anderson Silva decisively too? Or vice versa, you get Silva with that super fight win over GSP. It would just, just cement his legacy. And I think, in a way, that's why we hear Dana White trying to talk this up so much, is he really wants to develop that superstar and that legitimate Hall of Famer that stands out among all the rest as the kingpin and just the guy that is the best. And so I think that's why Dana pushes for these super fights to happen. It's because he wants to get that guy, that marquee guy. And, it's also, you got to imagine deep down Silva wants this opportunity, or should want this opportunity, to cement his legacy too, to really truly have a big fight and a big win going out, towards the end of his career that, he could really say, I beat George St. Pierre, welterweight champion. But yeah, I think that's just why, in a sense, I think it'd be doing Anderson a favor, whether he really wants it or not, to really get him a super fight before his career is over, just to give him the opportunity to cement his legacy like that. But yeah, definitely you could go back and forth with these super fights. There's definitely fights in their division. It messed things up and whatnot, but, you can look at it the other way of, creating your Muhammad Ali's and your Michael Jordans. But yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on the card. Solid night of fights. Guys brought it. I know there was a lot of decisions on the undercard. I didn't see all those fights, but I was following it online, and I was just like, it's going to be one of those kind of nights. But main card guys stepped it up and put on some good fights. So I think that's pretty much all we're going to cover in this episode. Cut it a little bit short, like I mentioned at the start. Probably going to change up the format, but we'll see what happens. And stay tuned, subscribe, follow on Twitter, all that good stuff. And any closing words, Coop?
No, that was a great night of fights. I'm enjoying it. The next round of predictions we're going to be doing is on the November 10th card for Rich Franklin versus Kung Lee. I'll have a few shows sandwiched in between now and then, so stay tuned. We'll let you know about the forthcoming details and breakthroughs on our formatting. Thanks for tuning in. Post some comments. We'll make sure to get your feedback highlighted in the show next time. And it's a pleasure as always.
All right. Signing off. Peace.